Hello, and welcome to VMware vSAN Management and Operations. My name is Javier Menendez, and I will be your instructor for this class. I'm one of the many full-time instructors that VMware has, and I've been with VMware for 11 years now. We're going to start this class with this chapter, which happens to be called Course Introduction. And if you take a look in this page, what they try to tell you is, number one, that you're here to enhance your skills. But besides that, if you look at the first paragraph, in the first paragraph, notice it says, VMware vSAN is a policy-driven, software-defined storage solution that is integrated with vSphere. So what exactly we're talking about? Let's dissect that statement. Number one, you need to understand that when you work with a vSAN cluster, you take X number of ES6 servers, minimum 3, maximum 64. And with those servers, you build a cluster. The big difference is that you don't rely on your traditional external storage. What we're talking about here is taking X number of ES6 hosts with internal drives. And through the power of software, we're talking about turning those internal disks into virtual shared storage. Now, when you take a look, dimension, policy-driven, you need to understand that vSAN is controlled with virtual machine storage policies. We have a default policy. That policy is called FTT1, failures to tolerate equals 1. That means that if you create a VM and that VM uses that policy, that VM will be a two-way mirror. You don't have to use that policy. You can create others. You can make a VM, use different RAID levels, for example, RAID 5, RAID 6, RAID 10, even RAID 0. We can create additional policies, some of them which are specific to stretch clusters. In this class, we will deal with all those policies. Not only that, when it says integrated with vSphere, we're talking about that vSAN does not rely on external appliances. This is built into the kernel. Having said that, it requires a separate license. And if you take a look at this page has the goals of this class. So the idea here is simple. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about this product. As we go through the chapters, one of them will deal with the ES6 server itself. In a nutshell, we're going to be talking about best practices, do's and don'ts, things to look for, things to avoid. We're going to be talking about patching and potentially upgrading your vSAN cluster. That's why you see the reference to vSphere Lifecycle Manager. Besides that, you can see we have a whole chapter that deals with vSAN resiliency. So we're going to be talking about that. What to expect when you have a failure or potentially multiple failures. We have a whole chapter dealing with virtual machine storage policies. And for example, what happens if you try to modify a policy that happens to be in use? Or perhaps what happens if you try to delete a policy if the policy is in use? By the way, hint, that will fail. Not only that, we are going to be talking about best practices when it comes to putting a server in maintenance mode. We're going to talk about all the choices that you have with vSAN. For example, we're going to explain the difference between full data migration, no data migration, and the default option. In a nutshell, the default option makes you move the bare minimum in order to make sure that every VM can continue to be operational. So that is called ensure accessibility. We have a whole chapter where we learn how to monitor the vSAN cluster. Another one that deals with troubleshooting a vSAN cluster. We have a whole chapter that deals with two-node clusters and stretch clusters. And besides those chapters, we have chapters that deal with new features. vSAN 7.0 Update 1 has a lot of new features. If you look at the bottom of this page, we have a chapter that deals with vSAN native file services. That is not really new in 7.0 Update 1. It was introduced in 7.0, but it was enhanced in 7.0 Update 1. We also have another chapter that deals with the concept of vSAN Direct. That is new in 7.0 Update 1. And as I go through the class, I will be doing a series of demos. So please make sure you pay attention to the demos. Now, when we look at this particular page, this one has a list of all the chapters. So we start with the course introduction, and we finish the class dealing with native vSAN file services. You're going to finish this class with a lab. And in that lab, you're going to set up a series of appliances that will control file services. And through those appliances and containers, you will be creating NFS or Samba shares. And you're going to be sharing those shares with non-ESXi hosts. Now, when you look at this page, we have this page in every single one of our classes. So as you go through the labs, you're going to notice that at different times we use different fonts. For example, we use monospace bold when telling you to execute a command inside of a VM. For that matter, we use boldface to let you know when you have to click on a particular tab on the vSphere client. And if you look at this page, in this page, all we try to tell you is that with every release of vSAN, VMware makes available a lot of different guides and PDFs. You can always download these guides by either going to docs.vmware.com or, for that matter, storagehub.vmware.com. The ones for vSphere in particular can always be found in docs.vmware.com. But the ones for vSAN happen to always be located in storagehub.vmware.com. Now, when you look at this page, besides talking about PDFs or guides that you should download, in this page, we also recommend the communities. Every time I teach a class in person or online, I always tell my students that they should join the communities. This way, you can log in and you can interact with your peers. You can learn from your peers. You can ask questions and so on. Now, when you look at this page, we also mentioned the support page. Notice HTTPS VMware.com support. We also mentioned hands-on labs. And this is something that you want to remember because you can test drive our software for free whenever it works for you. One of the most common questions is, when do I lose access to the equipment, to the kit, to the lab? And officially, you lose access in a normal class when the class is over. Having said that, like I said, you could always go to Hands-On Lab and test drive our software for free. And we also mentioned the education page. So when you go to this particular page, here we mentioned VMware.com education. Now, if you go to that page, very quickly you will realize that VMware has different types of classes. We have classes on vSphere, on vSAN, NSX, VRA, VROPS, and so on. And as an instructor, sometimes I teach in person, sometimes I teach from home. And also, if you go to that particular page, you will see that we have classes on demand. Now, when it comes to certification, a lot of people come to class because they want to become a certified vSphere administrator. Now, when you look at this page, we have different types of certifications. Most people typically mention the VCP exam. So when we're talking about VCP, we're talking about VMware Certified Professional. Above that, we have something called a VCAP exam. And as you can see on this page, VCAP is an acronym that stands for VMware Certified Advanced Professional. As an instructor in my case, I have a couple of VCPs and I also have one VCAP. We have different types of VCAPs. The one that I happen to have is the VCAP Deploy. There's another one called the Design. If you get those two, you become a VCIX. That is an implementation expert. And at the very top, we have VCDX. A VCDX, as you can see here, this is an acronym that stands for VMware Certified Design Expert. This is typically something that architects want to achieve, consultants perhaps. But most instructors typically just go for VCPs and VCAPs as well. One of my friends has a VCDX. But again, most people typically stop either with a VCP or potentially again in some cases with a VCAP exam. Now, when it comes to vSAN, we don't have a VCP for vSAN. But if you have a valid VCP, you can always go and take the vSAN specialist exam. If you take that exam, if you pass, immediately you become a vSAN specialist. The latest version of that particular test, as you can see here, is a vSAN Specialist 2020. Now, what follows is a quick video, and this video will show you how to use your lab. It will explain to you how to use the VLP environment. Thank you, and I will see you after that video.
Welcome everyone. This is Joe Cooper from VMware Education, and I'm here to walk you through the VMware Learning Zone lab environment for your courses. Hopefully doing this and watching this little walkthrough will make it a whole lot easier and answer a lot of your questions before they even come up about the VMware Learning Zone. Once you've enrolled in a course, you'll see the list of all of the different types of content that we have for your particular course. In this case, I'm looking at the vSphere Install, Configure, and Manage version 6.7 course, where there's some on-demand content, there's the lab, there's the assessment, and the evaluation. We're here to focus on the lab. So once you've logged into the VMware Learning Zone, and I'm going to assume that the fact that you have found this video tells me that you have logged in, okay? It's at vmwarelearningzone.vmware.com, okay? Hit the play button, and what'll pop up is the lab environment here. Now, it does take some time to get the labs fired up. At this point, the system is actually deploying an entire virtualized environment for you. So you should expect, depending on the course that you have enrolled in, for this to take a significant period of time in some cases. Okay? Like it says over here on the right-hand side where your entire lab manual is, this could take as long as 10 minutes. Okay? So make sure that you're patient with this, and when we come back, we'll walk you through the process of actually completing these labs and actually also getting some help when you need it. Well, that didn't take very long at all. Now, let's have a look at what we've got here. Notice that I'm in a browser here, and there's a bunch of stuff going on. I've got a bunch of applications, and I've got a desktop system right here in the middle pane, and it gives me some notes, okay? You'll note that what we are looking at here is a host name called student-a-01, and for most of our courses, this is where you'll start by doing the labs, okay? You'll notice a few things on here. On the left-hand side, we have a console, and this gives us access to all of the systems that make up your lab environment. In this case, I have a domain controller and access server. This also will typically act as your default gateway. For the vSphere Install, Configure, Manage version 6.7 course, I've got 2 ESXi hosts, I've got a vCenter server, and I've got the desktop that I'm working on right here, Student A01. And I can actually switch between the consoles on any of these systems. Notice when I click on this particular console, as it loads, it will actually be an ESXi host, and you can see that right now, this host is actually currently firing up. So again, be patient with this. Even though you've gained access to the system here, okay, student A01 is fired up and you're logged into this, the rest of the systems may be still currently starting. Okay, so this console gives you an idea as to whether they have finished starting and you're ready to begin doing labs. Let's head back over to student A01 and we'll collapse the console tab and we'll look at a few other things. I actually like to view this in a full screen mode. So let's go ahead and we can maximize this. And if you're really clever about it, you can also hide the ribbons and things like that in your own browser if you like, or you can always scroll up and down. Note here though, that if I'm scrolling up and down, that I don't necessarily have full access to the menu bars and things like this on the bottom of the screen. Okay. So be aware of this. You may actually want to move into, for example, you can exit full screen mode here. Let's do that. Exit maximized mode. Okay. You can place this in the center of the page if you like. Okay. There's lots of different things that you can do with this. Also, note that you can, on the right-hand side with your manual, notice, first of all, there's 123 steps or 123 pages in this particular manual. Okay. You can increase the font size. Okay. Don't forget that you will have a scroller here. Okay. You can create a floating window for this that you can drag around if you like. You can change the pages using the arrows and things like that. Very nice. Lots of different ways to manipulate this window. Note that if you want to actually collapse this back to the side, just hit the X here and you can expand the manual again. Now, as you begin doing work in the labs, you will notice that as you go through these, you'll start a lab and that there will be a guide me video for each of these labs. So if you get stuck in any of these labs for any reason, don't try to, for example, open a console and reconfigure the entire environment. Okay. One of the things that you can definitely do is go through the guide me labs for each of these labs here. Okay. So you'll note you've got a number of these labs. All of them have a full guide me video and it'll walk you through the process of each of the more complex components of
identified
the labs
by VMware ESXi, top left.
Now, if you're still stuck, there's always live help available for you during regular business hours. Okay. Don't forget, scroll up to the top of the screen and go ahead and find the help tab. There are a number of support options that are here. Okay. There are tips. You can download the user guide here for the VMware Learning Zone lab environment itself. Okay. Let's take a look at some of these support options. You can test your speed. If you're having trouble here at all with the environment, if it seems slow to you, you can head over to the speed test, where it actually allows you to start a test looking at all of the different components that make up the performance in your environment. Notice the speed of the learning zone, cloud speed, cloud latency, and VLP latency. So these are all different components that make up the performance in your environment. You can also email education support at edulabssupport@vmware.com. Okay. And you can have a look at some of the troubleshooting FAQs. Now, when you are done with the course, okay, you have the ability to end the particular lab setup. You've got 30 days for most of our courses to complete the course and all of the labs, like it says here. Okay. You can exit the labs and return later, or you can hit the end button. Now, if you hit the end button, you are done with these labs. Hitting the end button says, I'm done with the labs. I'm done with the class. I've completed all my labs, right? Once you hit that end button, you cannot come back to these labs, even if you're within that 30-day period for which you have access to the class. Okay. Also note here that it says that in this case, I have not met the criteria for completing the class. You actually have to hit at least 50% of the entire lab environment in order to do this. So please keep that in mind. Here's an interesting trick. As you're going through the labs, the lab manual will give you things like credentials, or may have a series of commands that it asks you to type in, or set up a series of scripts. Okay? If you highlight text in the lab manual, you're able to drag that text into the console, where it'll actually fill that straight in for you. So you don't need to even worry about copying and pasting. A drag and drop does a great job and then allows you to do things like log in to the vSphere environment. Oh, and one last thing. Don't forget, during normal business hours, you can chat with support. It's Inder G. Well, that does it for me. I hope you are really enjoying the online classes and you're having a good time with these labs. Of course, you can always reach out to us if you need any further support. I thank you for your time and attention, and have a great time. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, guys, welcome back. Hopefully you enjoyed the previous video. Hopefully that helps you understand how to use the lab and the whole setup. Let's finish this video. And after this, we're going to start with the next chapter. The next chapter is called vSAN Node Management. And it's a pretty cool chapter. It deals with different topics, such as hardware compatibility, the concept of updating and or upgrading your vSAN cluster, the idea of using Lifecycle Manager to upgrade, for example, firmware and driver version. So enjoy, and I'll see you in a few minutes. Thanks again.